All right, so welcome again. Glad to have you. As you know, the CXC is doing all it can to ensure that teachers and students are properly supported during this period. My name is Janet Clacken, and I'm the instructional designer here at the Caribbean Examinations Council. I just want to start by reminding you of our ground rules. If you have any questions at some point during or a few points during the presentation, I will allow you to raise your hand and share those questions or concerns. You are also reminded that when you are able to speak, when I provide that opportunity to you, once you are finished, we ask that you close out your mic to ensure that we don't have any feedback loops or any background disturbances. All right, and I do encourage you to be as participatory as possible, especially when I ask questions of you and I solicit your input. All right, so we're gonna get started. I want to find out how you've been doing. If you came in early, you'd have seen that I was playing the happy song. So I want to ask, what have you been doing to cope? Share some of your best strategies. I need at least one from you. So just spend a few seconds to reflect and decide which strategy you're going to share with us in terms of how you've been managing to cope during this time of social distancing and isolation. If you're new to our sessions and we invite you to participate at this time, but if you're not new and you would have gotten an opportunity to share in a previous session, we ask that you allow others to share now. So I'm going to invite persons to raise their hand to share what strategies they have been using to cope at this point. I don't see any hands going up yet. So yes, I see one hand. I'm coming to you. I can share one of my coping strategies is to use my lotion more often, because I'm definitely washing my hands more often. I started to get very concerned this week as my hands after each wash started to burn. And so I've decided to use more of my lotion and essential oils to help my skin to recover from the abuse of washing hands. So that is one of my coping strategies. I'm going to go to the list now to see who are the persons who want to share. Trisha and Brown, please go ahead, unmute your mic and tell us what is one of your coping strategies. Okay, Lindy and I think Ainsley, go ahead, unmute your mic and let's hear your strategy.
Hi, good evening, everybody. This is Lindy Ann from Trinidad. Two strategies. One is to remain connected to those that I love and friends and family. So lots of WhatsApping and lots of
very good
phone calls and stuff.
Right.
Being connected. And the second strategy is to not take on too many of the social media messages that we're getting and really focus on what the authorities and the experts are communicating to us.
Okay, those are two good strategies, Lindy Ann. Thank you for sharing. Go ahead and mute your mic for me. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Derek.
Hello. Hi, yes, okay. What I do is I watch a lot of Netflix.
Good one. Okay, great, Derek. Thank you. Mute that mic for me. And all right, I'll take one more. LBHS2, please speak.
Hi.
Hi.
I have focused a lot more on self-care. My name is Deannie Whiskey John. Okay. I'm from Turks and Caicos. So more self-care, making sure that I move, exercise, eat right, that kind of thing.
Okay, good one. Very good. And the authorities have been saying that to us. More and more, yes. Self-care is important, especially because we're not going to many places. We're not going to the workplace, nor to the school, nor to the church, nor to the very few trips to the supermarkets and so on. Yes, so self-care is important. Exercise. Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. So I'm going to move on. I see if you have some ideas you want to share, the rest of you, please put them in the chat. We can all benefit from them. Put them in the chat. Let's see. All right. Wonderful. At this time, I'm going to invite you to just indicate in the chat which country you're calling from, you're joining from, so that we have a sense as to how represented the region is. So just indicate that in the chat for me, please. Thank you very much. All right, so this evening, we just want to do 3 things. We're not going to spend long. I say that every time, right? So we continue to promote the CXC Learning Hub as a teacher resource. And as you use the Learning Hub, you'll see more and more changes will be effected. A few will come on next week. Some came on this week, and a few more will come on next week. So you'll see continuous improvement in the CXC Learning Hub, especially as it relates to you teachers. Access to the resource will come on stream pretty soon. We've worked on that, and we've decided on what strategy to use to get you to have ready access to the resources. So you'll be right in the thick of things. So don't worry, it will soon come your way. Tonight, we also want to look at some strategies that we can use to improve our online discussion experience with the students. And then we want to quickly review the role of the teacher in the online discussion. In the last 2 sessions, we looked at hosting live lessons and some of the strategies for doing that effectively. Last week, we looked at how to use the CXC Learning Hub to create what we call asynchronous lessons or guides to students as they work independently or self-paced with guidance in the online space. Today, we're looking at the online discussion and how to manage that. I must remind you that these sessions are part of what we call the skills, online teaching skills starter kit. So you are not expected to become masters of the online discussion space just by attending this one session. But certainly the session is geared towards helping you to have a little understanding of some of the issues surrounding the craft of hosting these discussions, and also to point you in the right direction in terms of the skills to hone as you work with your students in preparation for the exams and also for the completion of their learning at this level. I should make the point that the CXC Learning Hub at this time does not support online discussion forums, but there are a number of other resources available to you, simple resources such as Facebook, and more complex resources, as you would have seen there. Some of you would have raised Edmodo. Some schools are using the Google Classroom. Others of you are using more sophisticated tools. But nonetheless, whether you're using low-tech, high-tech, medium-tech, sophisticated, unsophisticated, there's a place for you to engage your students in the online discussion activity. All right? All right, so I want to start by asking you this question. What makes a discussion a good discussion? Whether the discussion is set in the online space or in the face-to-face space, whether it is at school, at work, at church, in the neighborhood, at a family gathering, what makes a discussion a good discussion? I'm going to ask persons to I'm going to lower all hands now, and then I'm going to ask persons who want to share to just raise your hand. Give me one thing that makes a discussion a good discussion. I want to hear from you. Go ahead, Derek.
Participation by all.
Participation.
Yeah.
Yes, good. Thank you for that. Anyone else? Derek, don't move, because if nobody else says anything, you're going to have to help them out. No one else? Oh, I see some hands. Yes, wonderful. Okay, Lindy Ann, go ahead.
I'm thinking it should be engaging and interesting to all those who are taking part in the discussion.
All right, good, great answer. Thank you. Go ahead, Christopher.
All right, you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, good night to all. Right, I wasn't seeing the option to unmute. Definitely one thing I think that makes a good discussion, the participants in the discussion must feel comfortable and feel free to give their actual viewpoints. There are many times you might have a discussion and people either don't want to share because they may feel, scared, or
right.
they may feel they may be victimized for sharing. So, but I found that if they feel comfortable to share, if you say upfront, listen, it doesn't matter what. Once you be respectful, we're listening to everyone's opinions. So don't feel afraid to share your opinion, and everybody's opinion is valuable. So once people feel comfortable, that definitely makes for a good discussion.
Wonderful. So we've heard about the participants feeling comfortable, the atmosphere. We've heard about having participants who are willing to engage in the process. We heard about the discussion itself being engaging. I'll take just one more. Patrice Duggins. Welcome again, Patrice. I remember you.
Hi, good evening. Hearing me?
Yes.
Good evening to all. I think another thing is the variety of contributions. Sometimes you may have like a particular streamline or particular topic, and it's nice when you get a lot of perspectives that cover most of the ground, other point of views.
Wonderful. Thank you, Patrice. Mute your mic for me. Thank you, colleagues. Now, if you didn't get a chance to share, and that's just in the interest of time, colleagues, I promise you one day I'm going to have one of these sessions that we can spend for hours. But today is not the day. So if you didn't get a chance to share, just put your response in the chat for me. But the responses so far have been spot on. Wonderful. Okay, so here are some general characteristics, elements of a good discussion. The discussion should have a leader, should have participants who are willing to participate. So you can't have a discussion with one by yourself, yeah? Although I tend to do that, but never mind, that's another discussion. But the active engagement and participation and diversity of perspective. So I've pretty much captured the basic elements and you've all said them already. So you see you're on the ball. Wonderful. So the point I want to raise here is that the discussion in the online space is not much different than the discussion in the face-to-face mode. It is just where we're having the discussion that changes. Yeah, the modality changes, but some of the basic dynamics will not change, because at the end of the day, what we're dealing with are people. Yeah, so don't feel intimidated about the experience. Embrace it, because you can handle it. You've done it many times before. So let's look at some of the principles for creating good online discussions, and these will form the basis of the discussion this evening or the presentation. We won't spend a long time today, so you'll see that we only have 4 points to go through. One, that we need to craft the discussion carefully. We need to set some ground rules. It's best to assign roles to students, and it's also good to manage your role. You have to be an active participant as a teacher in the discussion. Yeah? Good. So let's take them one by one and get going. So the first thing, you have to plan your discussion activity. Yes, teachers, planning again, I know. But a good discussion really just does not happen by itself. So some of the tips I can give to you this evening is to work towards those higher order cognitive skills in the discussion. Discussions, as you would have said, you want to get a range of perspectives. You want diversity of thought. And the best way to do that is to pitch for those higher order objectives in your lessons. So those objectives that are pitched at the higher level of the cognitive scale, and you can also drop down to some affective objectives as well. those two give you the best kind of topics for or issues for discussions in the online space, right? When you're trying to treat with an affective objective or a higher order cognitive objective, yes? Incorporate some kind of reflection. Your students need to get some opportunity to reflect. So your discussion activity must force them to start thinking about how they apply the knowledge that they're learning. And always choose issue over topic. Every topic has some underlying issues that can be explored. Use your issues as opposed to your topic. That way you keep your diverse perspectives in focus, yeah? And you get that range of thoughts and ideas from the issues, not the topics. So plan the discussion activity. In keeping with planning, you want to structure your discussion. You want to determine whether or not you break the students up into small groups and they discuss in their own groups, or you have a whole group discussion. You want to choose an instructional approach, and I'll speak about that in a little while. But you want to determine how you'll go about getting this discussion activity done. And we approach, like I say, we approach discussion in the online mode in a similar way as we'd have done in the face-to-face mode. Decide on word length and due date. Those things are very important, especially when you want to hold your students accountable. Word length is important because especially when you decide how large discussion is going to be, how many students, you want to manage just how much students have to interact with in the actual space. If you allow your students to write 1,000 words each, for example, then students will have a lot to go through, and that might be a turn off. So you want to set your word limit and your due date. This is still part of planning. Determine the inclusion requirements. What are you asking the students to reflect on and discuss in this space? You have to work those through carefully, because that will help you as you move to the next thing, which is to outline the contribution requirement. What is the minimum contribution requirement? So until you know exactly what you want them to speak about, until you determine inclusion requirements, then you will not know exactly how much they are required to contribute. Design a mark scheme or rubric for your discussion, or adopt one. All right? You can adapt as well. Yeah? So those things are very important. Still in planning, your discussion strategies, there are many discussion strategies that we use in the face-to-face. If you look at the list here, you'll see a number of them that we use in the face-to-face. Many of these can be translated into the online experience. And for more on discussion approaches or strategies, I invite you to visit the website Cult of Pedagogy. Don't be put off by the name. It does offer some very important tips and guidelines for teachers. So you can check them out to see a list of other strategies, discussion strategies that you can use both in the face-to-face setting and in the online setting. So plan, right? Set your ground rules. Someone said that earlier, that the atmosphere for discussion must be inviting, welcoming, encouraging participation. Now remember, the online discussion space, they don't benefit from tone and nonverbal cues. So you have to actually mitigate against that by asking your students to follow certain ground rules. Whatever ground rules you're creating for your online discussion, they must be hinged on the principles of digital citizenship and communication. Those are the two basic sets of principles that you want to keep in your ground rules. So you can spend some time researching a little bit more about digital citizenship, but one of our participants this evening spoke about it, people feeling, excuse me, colleagues, people feeling comfortable, people feeling that their opinions are valued and so on. Those are the issues that persons need to address in your ground rules, right? And you want to speak to communication. What rules do you want to set for communication in the online discussion space? Whether it is about speaking clearly, not using caps, shouting in the online space, responding to persons with respect, and so on. So those are the two principles: digital citizenship and communication. Your ground rules must be based on those two principles. All right. 3, assign discussion roles for students. The online discussion can be unwieldy because, especially when you have a number of students in the class, 15, 20, 30, that kind of thing. So it's always good to give some of your students some specific roles. And I've listed some here. Assign students the role of discussion leaders. So they actually monitor the discussion, monitor that persons are participating, spur persons on in terms of encouraging them to elaborate, to respond to each other, that kind of thing. Ask someone to be an advocate, someone who will push for a particular perspective, and ask someone else to be a critic or a devil's advocate, somebody who will challenge some of the points raised by the other students in the class. Get one of your students to be a connection specialist, someone who will link the different ideas put forward by the varying students and show where the connections appear. Someone who will check facts. And in the era of what we call fake news, a fact checker is always important. So give one of your students that role, and you'll see how it helps the students to participate and to be on their A game if they know that there's someone checking what they're saying in terms of the ideas putting forward, the ideas they're putting forward and the ideas they're using to substantiate those opinions. Then they'll do more research, they'll ensure that they come to the discussion prepared. And of course, a rapporteur or someone who will summarize some of what is happening in the discussion forum will also help you to manage the discussion. So this assign roles to students. It's always good too to rotate the roles. So as you move from one discussion activity to the other, shift the roles and give persons a chance to participate more actively in the discussion space. All right, before I get to this point, let me take a pause and take some questions. If you have a question at this point, just raise your hand. I'm lowering all hands now. So if you have a question at this point, I'll take 1 or 2 questions before I move on. I see 2 hands. Okay, Hillary, go ahead, Hillary. Let me hear from you.
My question was, is this for also online forums, like discussions via typing, or is this primarily for in a live situation, what you're talking about with especially the roles?
Okay, so this, and that's a good question, Hillary. Thank you for it. This will work for face-to-face sessions. It will work for live sessions. It's a little bit more difficult to manage with the live sessions because you have less time. So if you're gonna do this, students need to be thoroughly prepared ahead of the live discussion, but it can still work for live discussion because it will work in the face-to-face, yeah? And it will also work for what we call the asynchronous discussion forum, where the students only go on at a time convenient to them and post their responses. Yeah. So Hillary, a very good question. In any modality, this approach to the discussion activity will work. Thanks for that. All right, I have another hand. Carol, go ahead. Go ahead, Carol. Yes. Yes, Carol, go ahead. Oh, Carol, the internet where you are at seems to be a little bit troublesome tonight. Try again.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Back to where you were talking about crafting the discussion. Could you just clarify the point you made on issue over topic? Please?
Okay. So in every topic, and that's a good question, in every topic, there are some issues surrounding the topic. Issues that will come up in the syllabus, even in the application of the content to real life scenarios. So for example, let me see if I can raise one. Let's say environmental science. Let's say we're looking at the topic of recycling. There are issues surrounding recycling, issues relating to cost, issues relating to convenience, issues relating to culture. And what I'm saying is, instead of creating your activity around the topic of recycling, find an issue that you know will solicit or elicit divergence of thought and perspective. That will ensure or help you to ensure that the discussion is robust, it is interesting and engaging, because persons are better able to bring their own experience, thoughts, ideas to the discussion space. Yeah? Carol, did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Thank you for those 2 questions, colleagues. All right, so we said you are to plan the discussion and you are to incorporate strategies, and you can migrate some of your face-to-face discussion strategies into the online space. You are to set ground rules for your students based on the principles of digital citizenship and communication. And you are to assign roles. It's always best to engage your students through role assignment. All right. So here we come to you now as the facilitator, because you also have some role to play. Note the word I'm using here, facilitator. You are not a sage on the stage. You are not the person with all the ideas and the authority on everything in the discussion. You are facilitating, you are an active participant. You are engaging the students, but also you are engaging in the discussion activity yourself, ensuring that the points that you need to rise to the top, so to speak, get to the attention that they need in order to facilitate the achievement of your objective. So here are some activities for the facilitator. And again, you're not a teacher in the online discussion space, you're a facilitator. One of the first things you have to do is to harvest the ideas that are coming up in the discussion space. Now, this requires that you carefully monitor the discussion. You don't have to sit and watch every post that goes up, but you must devote some time to monitor each discussion forum so you can actually extract what relevant information is coming to the fore from your students. So harvest, collect, collate, curate, whatever word you want to use, we call it harvesting. You harvest the relevant information. You want to weave the relevant information too by linking points to points. Where you see a point raised by one student has some relationship to another point raised by a second student or a third student, then you point the students to that linkage in the discussion. So you link information in the discussion space. Recap interactions, especially if you have set a time frame within which your online asynchronous discussion is to be concluded. Let's say you give your students 7 days to post and respond to others, then you summarize at the end of that period the main points and ideas. And you can easily do that if you've been extracting the relevant information and you've been weaving as you go along. You want to also note those questions or comments that you want to address at a later point, because in any discussion, there are some ideas that come up that may not be most pertinent to the exact discussion, but it is useful to bring back to the table at a later point, at some other point in the syllabus, or maybe in a follow-up discussion. You want to make note of those and track them, right? So we hold questions. So as facilitators, We do some harvesting in the discussion space. We do some weaving. We do some summarizing, and we hold some questions. That is, track comments and questions for address at a later date. All right. Good. Let me ask if there are any questions as it relates to your role here. One of the things, even before I open the mics again, one thing you should recognize is that as you build the skills of your students to participate meaningfully in an online discussion, you are able to divest some of these activities to them. Students can harvest, weave, summarize, hold questions themselves, but it takes a little bit more maturity and some modeling. You have to model that for them over a period of time before they are able to do that effectively. So don't be perturbed, don't feel overwhelmed that this is a lot of work you're going to have to be doing every time you go to the online discussion activity. Once you get your students familiar enough with the protocols for the discussion, the activity of engaging in an online discussion, you can start to divest some of these activities to them. All right, so let me take any questions now. Any hands? It's clear as crystal? Wonderful. All right, so great, because we are almost coming to the end. So, and I did promise that we are not going to spend a long time today, and today I hope to keep my promise. All right, so here are some common pitfalls to avoid. Keep your questions open-ended. A lot of times in the online discussion activity, you see close-ended discussions that really don't lend themselves for that diversity of opinions and ideas and so on. So you want to keep the questions as you craft them, as you plan them, to be open-ended and allow for diversity of ideas. Yeah. A good way to do that is to use controversial ideas as part of your activity. So you focus your question on those issues around the topics that are controversial, that you are sure will create this for and against space where persons will come with strong ideas and opinions about what's happening. Yeah, but try to limit your use of questions that just seem close and restrictive. Create discussions and nothing else. I can't tell you how many times I've gone into discussion spaces and see activities that are more suited for worksheets. Yeah, I've actually even seen quizzes in a discussion space. The discussion space is not for that. Just as though at the beginning of this session, you spoke to me about what elements are included in a good discussion. The online discussion is created to facilitate that kind of experience. So don't put your worksheets and your essay questions in the online discussion activity. Create a discussion activity, nothing else. As you craft the discussion activity, speak directly to your students. I find sometimes that the discussion prompt is very pedantic, for want of a better term, very structured, very academic. I'm not asking you, and I'm struggling to find the right word here, but I'm not asking you to be informal. I'm asking you to use language that creates the kind of atmosphere that suggests discussion. Yeah, I hope you understand that, and if you can interrogate me on that as we draw closer to the end of the session. Use a standard rubric, and by that I mean it's best to create a rubric that you can apply to all discussion activities. I know sometimes you would have seen discussion rubrics that are specific to the actual content explored in the discussion, but a best practice is to stay away from that, so that whatever mark scheme or rubric you create for the discussion activity, A, can be used in discussion activity, B, discussion activity C. It helps the students, for example, to understand exactly how to approach a discussion activity, because the rubric is standard. So they know they approach each discussion with pretty much the same kind of rigor or principles and that kind of thing. And it also helps you to mark or grade the discussion activity if you're doing so. So you don't have to recalibrate each time you go to a new discussion activity, because you know the rubric or the mark scheme is standard. Keep the activity short, and I said this before, especially if you are dealing with a number of students in one space. You don't want your students to be writing long papers or the equivalent of such short essays in the discussion space, because remember, the discussion is supposed to, within the time frame that you have given, be something that is ongoing. So someone will make a single post and then they'll attempt now to respond to others. If the single or initial post of each student is very long, then you'll find students become very frustrated easily and they opt out of responding to others, even if you grade them for responding to others. So you want to encourage them to respond and respond in a full way, but at the same time to limit the length of the post. Another thing that helps to do is it gets your students to synthesize the information that you are asking them to engage with. And that's a higher order skill on your in your taxonomy, right? So it forces the student to not just tell you what the textbooks are saying and what the websites and articles are saying. It asks them to condense all of this into, deconstruct what they've read and reconstruct into a discussion post. Good skills for the 21st century. So you get to hit a number of skills at the same time when you force your students to keep the discussion post short. Hold the students accountable. And I speak directly now to students responding to others and students who have specific roles in a discussion. You keep an eye on them and encourage them, point them out, reach out to them so that they are aware that they are not just left up to their own, but they are being held accountable for their role in the discussion, because every discussion needs participation. And if we are not participating, then the discussion can't happen. We said it before at the beginning of this session itself, right? A good practice is to grade their discussion activity. Now, that may not necessarily work right now in the COVID regime, but generally colleagues, grading the discussion activity encourages participation. Many times in the online space, students don't do anything unless they're being rewarded for it. It's a behavioral approach, I know, but sometimes as experienced teachers that behavioral approaches do work. So you want to grade your activity. Please don't assign too many marks to your discussion activity. You don't want the students to be penalized if they are not able to participate in the discussion for one reason or another, but you want to give enough marks that will motivate them, give them encouragement to actually participate. All right. Good. So it is 6:43. We are right on time. This is a 45-minute session. So I'm on the screen here, you should be seeing the email for support at the CXC. So if you need to find out more from us, get further support from us in this area, you can contact us by using this website. And I'm just gonna pause right here to take some questions if you have them. All right, I have one question. Shamarla Hercules, I think it is. Did I say that right? Yes. Go ahead, Shamara.
Hello?
Yes, Shamara, go ahead.
You mentioned having a standard rubric for your discussions. And you mentioned that you can have a standard rubric for all your discussions. Can you give me some examples of what might be in a rubric like that?
Okay. So one of the generally, you must mark for content, but you want to organize your rubric in a way that it speaks generally to the quality of the content contribution, right? So quality of content is one. If you're teaching at a level that requires the students to do some amount of research, evidence of research is another that you could mark for. Response to others is one, and timeliness is another. So timeliness, response to others, quality of content, and evidence of research. You could also mark for language use in your discussion. Yeah, so those are 5 areas already. So Shamara, I hope that helps.
Yes, that does.
Yeah, you can do some further research. There are a number of what we call open educational resources online that provide you with rubrics for discussions, general rubrics for discussions that you can adapt or adopt for your classroom. All right?
Okay then. Okay, thank you.
No problem. Hillary Ferguson.
Hi, thanks again. Really, really interesting. I'd like to know what online tools you suggest to have the discussions. You were saying not to have it in a common space where you share other things like quizzes and worksheets. So I'm wondering what other online tools, for example, I use Edmodo, but you're saying it's best not to probably put a discussion within the Edmodo platform, but somewhere else. So what tools would you suggest? That's one question. The second one is in terms of providing discussions such as during an office hour, like via Zoom. I was trying that this week. Not one student showed up. So I'm wondering, is there something that you would suggest that could encourage or motivate students to want to utilize that time that they could talk with their teacher about whatever work they have to get done, or what strategies you suggest for motivation in that kind of atmosphere as well?
All right.
So those are the questions.
Thank you, Hillary. Let me clarify the first question. I actually didn't say that you are not to use the platforms that allow you to do other things. What I was saying is that your discussion activity itself should only be a discussion, and you should not make an assignment, an essay question, for example, or a quiz the basis of a discussion activity or a worksheet. So let me see if I can make it more visual for you. So I went into a discussion activity once as monitoring a teacher on teaching practice in the online space. She created a discussion by simply taking a science worksheet, something that asks the students to probably do an experiment, write up a log, and then she actually just asked them to post the log in the discussion space. Yeah? Or you give your students essay questions, even short answer questions, 6, 7, sometimes I've seen 10, 12, 20, and the students are to answer the questions and post the answers in the discussion space. Okay. So when you actually open the discussion, when you actually open the discussion as a student or a teacher looking on, you actually see what looks like an actual worksheet activity in the discussion space. And what I'm saying is that a discussion is not a worksheet. It is not a science log activity. It's not an essay question. It is a discussion, and you treat it as though you are encouraging the students to have those discussions they'd have with their peers and yourself, or those short discussions you'd have in class around a topic or around an issue. Yeah, and you allow for the actual activity to solicit diversity of ideas. With a worksheet scenario, everybody will put the same answer. Do you understand what I'm saying, Hillary? And so there's no Yes, go ahead.
Yes, that clears it up a lot. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. As it relates to,
I'm breaking you here. Sorry.
Sure.
Presenter to ask questions on behalf of persons because they're having difficulties with microphones. Only 10 mics we see. So this is from Caroline Hudson.
Sure.
She's asking what would be an appropriate length of an online discussion with students.
All right.
And I have others.
Okay, I'll take this one now. So the length is dependent on what you're asking your students to discuss. But generally, you don't want for them to write more than 500 words as their initial post. And that may be a little bit too much for high school students. So 350 to 400 words, not bad. You have to find a way to craft the question so that if they have to pull a lot of information into one, synthesize to come up with the response, you cue them in on that, but you get them to write no more than 350, 450, not more than 500 words as students. And then you set a word limit also for the responses, maybe about 200, 250 words. I hope that helps.
Okay, this is from Jacqueline. She says, I work in a special education setting. Many of our students are not verbal, but the majority of our senior students are verbal and have some cognitive strengths. Do you have any suggestions about how I may use these ideas to adapt them for my students?
Can you just read that first part again, Florette, please? Thank
many
you.
of special educational setting, many of our students are non-verbal, but majority of our senior students are verbal and have some cognitive strengths.
Right.
On suggestions now about how she may use the ideas and adapt them for these students.
Okay. I would say that's a difficult question to answer off the bat, because a lot depends on the actual skill set of the students before you, the students in your class. But a good thing to do is to use up the roles. So even the students who are not so verbal, you can find things to get them to do. They can actually be the ones who check the number of words in a discussion, for example, and encourage persons to reduce or add. They can be fact checkers. So you can create your own roles too. So look at your students, look at their profiles, look at what you think they could be able to accomplish or what role they could play in a discussion. Define the role and assign them the role. So that's one way of working it through. The other way is to get the students who are better at it, who are more equipped to handle it, to assist you in terms of one, assisting those other students to participate, and also to lead the discussion so that you can focus on the students with your diverse needs. Lastly, I would suggest, and the point came to my mind and it just went, hold on, using other students. I'm sorry, it has left me, but it will come back and I'll tell you what it is. But you can try those, giving the students roles based on their own unique abilities, and assigning your stronger students to assist the ones who need assistance. That point has just eluded me. Sorry about
that. Add something to what you just said, though, that within the discussion, for example, if they have to explain to the students a concept, they could probably use pictures, more images, graphics.
That's right. I was about to. That was the point I wanted.
Oh, that was your point, oh dear.
Yes. That using the images, the graphics, the pictures. There was another point to that. Is as though I wanted to say, you can model it if you have that ability. You may not be able to do that now, but if in the normal space we're back to normal, we're not so sure what our new normal will be, but if you are able to model the discussion in the face-to-face in a way that prepares them for the online. That is also something that you can do to build the skills of the students.
All right, I see 2 more questions. Can you have leading questions to prompt research and content?
Yes, you can. That lead up is always, this is why I say it's important to plan. You have to carefully craft your prompt, and that is the thing that the students will respond to. Sometimes the prompt will include questions themselves that lead to the actual question you want to focus on. So crafting the prompt is very important.
Okay, this one is from Makeda. She's asking, this one before. Could you give us an example of how to state the discussion question? That's from Donette. An example of how to state the discussion question.
All right, I think I raised one before. The matter of recycling, the issue. It's difficult because you come with the different subject areas, but focus on those questions that create divergence or controversy, open-ended. So let's go back to that. Environmental science, recycling. Let me ask you, any environmental science persons in the room, what issues come up in that discussion? I'm going to lower the hands and you can raise your hand and tell me. Only one more hand was up. All right, let me see. I can't find your hand. Hold on. No hand yet? Okay. Raise your hand, man. I saw a hand before. I'm not a subject specialist that way, you know. So it's difficult for me to give you one that is relevant to the CXC. But okay, I see a brave soul. Go ahead, Hillary.
Climate change, greenhouse gases, global warming, that sort of thing is a big topic of controversy, what person should and should not be able to do.
Right. So could you give me an example of that for global warming?
Of a controversial issue in global warming, should persons be allowed to, let's see, well, I'm not an environmental science teacher, but I teach biology, so it has certain aspects of it. Let's see. On a factory level, perhaps fines for the amount of greenhouse gases that are released, how much be fined, what is reasonable. Let's see, on a more personal level, should persons be able to drive certain distances without, let's say, carpooling or something to that effect?
Right. Those are good examples. If I may draw one from current affairs today, because I think we all can relate to that. Thank you, Hillary. Those are good examples. Recently in Jamaica, our Prime Minister announced that he will not allow Jamaicans overseas to return home just yet until quarantine spaces have been created for them to be housed, government monitored quarantine spaces. And so it has caused a big stir, quite a big discussion in the social space about whether or not it is constitutional to bar persons from returning home. So I don't know which particular subject that will probably fall on. I'm sure social studies is one, for example. There may be others, but know that particular, do you believe that his approach is useful, or is it the correct approach? That kind of thing. You want to pose a question that asks the students to draw from, because right away persons are going to have to go to the Constitution, they're going to have to draw from public opinion, they're going to have to look at best practices in other places and that kind of thing. So it allows for them to pull from a number of information sources, actually state their own opinion, and allow for others to challenge what they are saying. I hope that responds to the question, Florette. Let's take the next one. Thank you.
All right. I was thinking though that maybe, I don't know if you said it before, that they should ask each other student to respond and that sort of thing. Was that clear?
Yes. Right.
All right. So it was Makeda, and she got her answer. She wanted to know when exactly will the candidate numbers be issued. The answer came in there. That will verify with the Examinations and Securities Division.
All right. Good.
Okay, so that's probably it for now.
All right. So Hillary, if you still have a question, let me unmute you now. Do you?
Yes, it was just the office hour suggestions. If you have any strategies for how to conduct. Yes.
Okay. I am gathering, Hillary, that this is a real issue for the teachers of the region, not just in your country, but in other countries as well, that the reports are coming in that the students are not joining a number of the sessions being created in the online space. It is difficult to say how to motivate them when you are so, they've been cut off for so long, and they're probably developing some bad habits. But let's try some traditional approaches. One, reach out to the parents. We are finding, even at the CXC, that a number of the parents feel disconnected in the online space. Yeah. Well, they feel disconnected in the process of bringing the students in the online space. So you're probably going to have to try that as one of your strategies. In the past, students would have been spurred by controversy or an opportunity to share their own opinions. I'm not sure if that is something that will work, especially if you've not been modeling and scaffolding that kind of approach in the classes before the COVID and the COVID interventions. But try to use topics that you think can pull them out. Go back to some of the earlier discussions we had. If you've been coming to these sessions, prepare the students before they come. In other words, let them know what is being discussed, how it relates to the syllabus, how it will help them to pass the exams, because at this point sometimes the students are motivated only by the threat of exam and not passing the exam.
No, just if I could interject, sorry. The question was more so to do with like informal, what should I say, like an office hour, like a traditional office hour that professors have, you know. There's no issue so much when it's an official class. The students come to those,
right?
But when it's just a time when they personally could, like, you make yourself available for just general issues, that's when I'm not seeing any. It's basically, it's not mandatory then. The office hour is not mandatory. So I'm just wondering if you have any suggestions for...
There's one suggestion I have for that. If you are finding that the students are not coming, a good thing to do is to refer them to the session. So as you go through, as you're providing feedback on the different activities, if you find certain gaps in a student, you say to the student, hey, this is a significant gap. We need to work on this. Meet me in the office hour and on this day at such a time. And you do that for a few of them. And once they start coming, you'll find that they'll come back. Once they come and they get support, you'll find that they come back. So refer a couple of your students to the session. Once you find that they need it, refer them to come. So you tell them, hey, we'll look at this, but we'll look at it in the consultation hour. Then they'll start sharing with the others, hey, this is what we discussed with the teacher in the office hour. Maybe you need to go to the office hour and see her, that kind of thing. I find that works all the time for the office hour. Even in the face-to-face, it works. So try it and see.
Okay, right? Thanks so much.
No problem.
There's another question, I'm sorry, from Betty. She doesn't have a mic on.
Right.
But she's asking about what if the students are not ready concerning exams, how majority are not ready for e-testing in multiple choice. What could they, she said, what could they attend and how exams would be? So I'm not so sure the question. That's what I see, but I suspect she wants to know what's intended for the students who are not ready for e-testing.
Vedish, that's a tough question, and I'm not sure we're prepared to answer that question right now. Oh, my senior manager is here to the rescue. She's brought her cape and the Superwoman logo for her chest. So she's here. She'll take it away.
All right. So, colleagues, I know there's a lot of anxiety about e-testing, but what we want to assure you is that we have been working with the various ministries of education, and the intent, while everybody is required to do multiple choice, the release did not specifically say everybody would have been tested in an electronic environment. What ministries are doing, and they will respond and advise accordingly if they are accepting the option of doing the e-testing. And as that discussion progresses, if there are changes, your ministries of education will duly notify you, and so will the Caribbean Examinations Council. What I will use this opportunity to say, though, is that for persons who are interested in being exposed to e-testing, we will be running a session similar to this around e-testing, around exposure to the platform. And so we would like to invite you officially to participate in that session. I'm not recalling the date from the top of my head, but it will also be circulated like we did for this particular session.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Williams, very much. All right. So I hope that clarifies for everyone. All right, good. I do see one that is Vadish. Vadish, I'm going to lower your hand. I hope your question was adequately responded to.
Well, in fact, she raised another question about when CXC would put out another release.
Okay.
I am not in a position to say exactly when another press release would be made, but what I do know is that the registrar has been very active in the media, providing information around the decisions that are being made by the organization. I know, for instance, today he did several interviews on regional television and radio stations, and we try to make the links available so that persons can access the information. But once we have a formal statement to make, you don't have to get anxious. Once there's a formal statement to make that is going to change what is already out in the press release, one will be published. That is our commitment to our stakeholders. And I hope that answered your question, Vanish.
All right. Any more questions, Florette, please? Oh, I see hands coming. Colleagues, I want to invite you to respond to the poll question. I've published a poll question just for you to give us feedback on today's session because we are about to close. We have taken note of the hands, so don't worry, we're going to come to them shortly. But if you have not responded to the poll question just yet, please do so now. We ask you to do so. Thank you so much. All right, I'm gonna take some hands here. Patrice.
Jen, Jen, there are a couple of questions that came up in the chat relative to exams. If you just allow me to try and respond to those I can respond to.
Okay.
I see a question from Clark regarding paper 3 for French and Spanish. If my memory serves me correctly, that's the oral paper. The candidates will be required to do orals. The finer details regarding how that will be administered is being worked out with the Ministries of Education, and the schools and candidates will be informed of how that will be executed. With respect to the timetable, I was just informed by my colleagues that we have released a timetable that supports the decision. It was sent to the local registrars and the Ministries of Education, so that information you can access from your ministry. It's not available from what I saw on the CXC website because I did a search just now. And with respect to human and social biology, the exception with human and social biology is that candidates will be required to do paper 2 because human and social biology does not have an SBA component. So candidates will be required to do paper 1 and paper 2 for human and social biology. For visual arts, the exception with visual arts is that candidates are required to do the journal. And I'm scrolling quickly, Jen, to see if there are other questions. Sure. The MC papers, we expect will have the same setup as the others. Oh, I see a point being made that there is a timetable going around, but it does have paper 2. All right, so if the timetable you see has paper 2, let me just verify with my colleagues in exams and see if we can get a hold of a copy of the correct timetable that would have been released and share that with the group when we are sending out the link for this session. Once we get that approval, we will share it with the group. If not, we will share with you where you can access the correct timetable. I answered the question about visual arts. I answered the question about timetable, human and social biology. I think that's it.
All right. There's a question about when exams will begin, and I think you said the person should consult their local registrars and their ministry officials, correct?
Right. Because what we did say in the release was that we were looking at July. The registrar has not made any other declarations outside of that, so that is officially where we are. Just to say that the position of the council is that we are monitoring what is happening with this pandemic as everybody else, and our primary focus is making sure that our stakeholders stay safe. Mm-hmm. And so if things change and that the decisions of the ministry, the governments of the region necessitates any kind of change in discussion, I'm sure that is a discussion that the registrar will lead and that the public will be notified accordingly.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jodine. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, Jodine Williams, our Senior Manager in charge of Syllabus and Curriculum Development. All right, so I only see 3 more hands, and at this point, before I take these last 3 questions, I just want to thank you. It is 7:12, and we want to thank you for joining us. It was really a productive evening and a very engaging conversation we had this evening too, like always. I thank you for your participation and thank you for supporting us as we try to support you in this time of uncertainty and great change. Thanks to my panelists, my co-panelists, Florette Williams and Jodine Williams from the Caribbean Examinations Council. And I am Janet Clacken. Thank you very much. And we look forward to seeing you in our other sessions. Pay attention to our social media pages and your other ways of finding out about what we're doing so that you are kept abreast of the plans we have to serve you.